The sign was staked deep into the frost-hardened lawn I had spent 6 months bringing back to life. It was a glossy, high-end placard from Oak and Iron Realty, shouting for sale in bold crimson letters. My stomach dropped straight through the floorboards of my car. I had not listed my home. I had not even spoken to a realtor. Yet there it was, promising a Sunday open house for a life I had never agreed to sell. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of my hatchback, a sound that usually signaled the beginning of my weekend sanctuary. I had spent the last 3 years rebuilding my life from the ground up, and this house in Alder Ridge was the trophy at the finish line. It was not a mansion, not like the sprawling estates on the north side of the lake where the old money lived, but it was mine. It was a 2-bedroom craftsman with good bones and a porch that caught the late afternoon sun. I had scraped together the down payment dollar by painful dollar, eating ramen and working overtime until my eyes burned, just so I could hold a set of keys that no one could take away from me. Or so I thought. I turned the engine off, letting the silence of the neighborhood wash over me. I reached for my bag in the passenger seat, my mind already drifting toward a glass of red wine and the book waiting on my nightstand. Then I looked up. My breath hitched in my throat, a sharp, painful inhalation that felt like swallowing a stone. There, staked brutally into the frost-hardened lawn I had spent 6 months nursing back to health, was a sign. It was not a political placard or a contractor's advertisement. It was a glossy, high-end real estate sign. The post was painted a stark, aggressive white, and hanging from the crossbar was a metal panel in deep crimson and charcoal. Oak and Iron Realty, for sale. I blinked, certain that the stress of the work week had finally caused a hallucination. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The sign remained. It was arrogant in its placement, angled perfectly to catch the attention of anyone driving down Elm Street. I opened the car door and stumbled out, my legs feeling strangely numb. I walked toward it, my boots sinking slightly into the grass. I reached out and touched the cold metal, half expecting my hand to pass through a hologram. It was solid, it was real, and attached to the bottom was a smaller rider strip that read, "Open House Sunday." My stomach dropped straight through the floor of my body. I felt a wave of nausea so potent I had to grip the wooden post to keep from swaying. I had not listed my house. I had not spoken to a realtor. I had not even whispered the word sell to a single soul. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a jarring vibration against my hip. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. It was a text from Jessica, a coworker I sat next to in the marketing department. "Congrats," the text read, followed by a champagne bottle emoji. "I had no idea you were moving. This listing looks amazing. Are you upgrading to the lakefront?" Below the text was a hyperlink. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a dark, churning ocean. I tapped the link. The browser loaded a sleek, professional page from Oak and Iron Realty, and there it was, my house. The lead photo was an exterior shot taken clearly within the last few days, capturing the morning light hitting the front porch. I scrolled down, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Charming craftsman in the heart of Alder Ridge. Motivated seller. Exquisite attention to detail. Motivated seller. The words mocked me. I scrolled further, and that was when the violation turned from confusion to ice-cold terror. There were interior photos. High resolution, professionally lit images of my living room, my kitchen, my bedroom. I stared at the image of the living room. My gray sectional was there, but the throw pillows were different. They were cream-colored, textured wool. I did not own cream-colored pillows. The coffee table was cleared of my magazines and styled with a generic wooden bowl filled with green apples. Someone had been in my house. I swiped to the next photo. My kitchen. The counters were gleaming, stripped of my toaster and coffee maker. A vase of fresh hydrangeas sat on the island. I looked closer at the corner of the frame. My favorite ceramic spoon rest, the one I bought in Santa Fe, was gone. I swiped again. My bedroom. The bed was made with military precision, the duvet smoothed to an unnatural flatness. I stood there in my front yard, the wind biting at my exposed cheeks, and felt a violation so profound it made my skin crawl. Someone had entered my home, moved my belongings, staged my sanctuary with props, photographed it, and then left. And now, the entire world was being invited to walk through it on Sunday. The nausea hardened into something else, a sharp, jagged realization. There was only one other person who had a key. My mother. I did not go inside. I could not bear to walk through the front door and see where they had touched my things. I got back into my car, slammed the door, and reversed out of the driveway with a screech of tires that made Mrs. Higgins next door look up from her gardening. My parents lived 3 miles away in a house that was too big for them, a sprawling colonial that my mother treated more like a museum than a home. I drove those 3 miles with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind replaying the photos, the green apples, the hydrangeas, the cream pillows. It was staging. It was theater. When I pulled into their driveway, their house looked picture perfect, as always. Harold and Marlene Roberts did not do messy. They did manicured hedges and freshly painted shutters and appearances, always appearances. I marched to the front door and didn't bother knocking. I used the key I had been given 10 years ago and shoved the door open. Marlene was in the foyer, arranging lilies in a crystal vase. She looked up, her face arranging itself into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was wearing a cashmere cardigan and a soft lilac, her hair coiffed into a stiff, immovable helmet of blonde. "Savannah," she said, her voice light and airy. "We were not expecting you for dinner." I held up my phone, the screen displaying the Zillow listing of my house. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was low, shaking with the effort to keep from screaming. Marlene glanced at the phone, then back at the flowers. She plucked a dead leaf from a lily stem. "Oh, that," she said. "I told the realtor not to put the sign up until tomorrow. They are so eager these days." "You told the realtor?" I repeated, stepping closer. "You listed my house?" Harold appeared from the den, holding a tumbler of scotch. He looked tired. His shoulders slumped in his expensive button-down shirt, but his eyes were guarded. "Savannah, keep your voice down," Harold said. "The neighbors have windows open." "I don't care about the neighbors," I shouted. "The dam finally breaking. I care that my house is for sale on the internet. How did you even do this? How did you get in?" Marlene sighed, a long, suffering sound that suggested I was being incredibly unreasonable. "We used the spare key. Obviously," she said. "We just wanted to tidy up a bit for the photos. You know how you get with your clutter." I stared at them. They were standing there, in their beautiful foyer, discussing the felony breaking and entering of my home as if they had simply done me a favor by doing my laundry. "You cannot sell my house," I said, enunciating every word. "It is my house. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage." Harold took a sip of his scotch and looked at me with a pitying expression that made my blood boil. "It is just a gauge." "Savannah," he said calmly, "we are just testing the market. We are not saying you have to move out tomorrow." "Testing the market?" I laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. "It says open house on Sunday. It says motivated seller." Marlene walked over and placed a hand on my arm. Her skin was cool and dry. "Sweetie, listen," she said, her tone shifting to that cloying sweetness she used when she wanted something. "You know how much this wedding means to Brooke. She has been dreaming of the venue at the Gables since she was 12. It is expensive, Savannah, astronomical. And?" I pulled my arm away. "What does that have to do with my house?" "Well," Harold said, clearing his throat, "your sister deserves one perfect day. We are a little stretched right now, liquid asset-wise. We thought, if we could just unlock the equity in your place." "Unlock the equity." He used the buzzword like a shield. "You are selling my home to pay for Brooke's wedding?" I asked, feeling like the floor was tilting. "It is temporary," Marlene said quickly. "We would pay you back. Once the business picks up next quarter, Harold will write you a check. You could move back in here for a few months. It would be like old times." Like old times. The phrase sent a shiver of dread down my spine. Old times meant me living in the shadow of Brooke's golden glow. Old times meant me being the practical one, the one who didn't need new clothes, the one who didn't need a car, because Brooke needed those things more. No, I said, absolutely not. Take it down. Call the realtor right now and take it down. Harold hardened his jaw. He set his glass down on the entry table with a sharp clack. We cannot just take it down. Savannah. Contracts have been signed. People are coming on Sunday. Do not be selfish. Selfish? I whispered. Think of your sister, Marlene added, her eyes welling up with practiced tears. She is under so much stress. If we have to cancel the venue now, it will destroy her. Do you want to be the reason Brooke's heart is broken? They were doing it again. The pivot, the guilt, the weaponization of family loyalty to cover up their own boundary-stomping entitlement. I am not the one breaking her heart. I said, you are the ones writing checks you cannot cash with my assets. I am going to the realtor. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Harold call out, Savannah, do not make a scene. You are embarrassing yourself. I drove to the offices of Oak and Iron Realty with a singular focus. The office was located in the town square, a modern glass and brick building that smelled of money and ambition. I parked in a spot reserved for future homeowners and stormed inside. The receptionist looked up, startled by my velocity. I need to see the agent who listed 34 Maplewood Drive. I said. She blinked, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. That would be Trent Holloway. Do you have an appointment? I do not need an appointment. I said, I am the owner of the house. Her eyes widened. She picked up her phone and whispered something. A moment later, a man emerged from a back office. He was tall, wearing a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too bright. He looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced vaguely handsome, morally flexible men. Ms. Roberts, he said, extending a hand. Trent Holloway, a pleasure. I must say, the photos turned out beautifully. I did not shake his hand. Take it down, I said. Trent's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, before he pasted it back on. I beg your pardon? My house. I said, you listed it without my permission. Take it down, now. Trent chuckled, a condescending sound that grated on my nerves. I think there is a misunderstanding, he said, smoothing his tie. I have full seller authorization. All the paperwork is in order. Your father was very thorough. My father does not own the house. I said, I do. Show me the paperwork. Trent's expression cooled. He took a step back, crossing his arms. I cannot just show confidential client files to anyone who walks in off the street. Ms. Roberts, I am not anyone, I snapped. I am the owner. So you say, Trent drawled. But the documents I have say that Harold Roberts has the authority to manage the disposition of the asset. Look, if you have a domestic dispute with your family, I suggest you handle it at home. I have a job to do. Show me the authorization, I demanded. Trent looked at his watch. If you want to review the file, you will need to book a formal appointment. My next opening is Tuesday at 4. Tuesday? I said. The open house is Sunday. Trent shrugged. Then I guess we will see how the market responds on Sunday. Now, if you will excuse me, I have paying clients to attend to. He turned his back on me and walked into his office, closing the glass door with a soft, final click. I stood there, shaking with rage, as the receptionist pretended to type very intently. I walked back to my car, my hands trembling so hard I dropped my keys in the parking lot. I snatched them up and sat in the driver's seat, locking the doors. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear her say it. I dialed Brooke. She answered on the second ring. Hey, stranger, she chirped. Her voice was bright, breathless, the voice of a woman who was the center of the universe. I am literally just looking at cake toppers. Did you know you can get them custom printed in 3D? Ethan thinks it is tacky, but I think it is modern. Brooke, I said, cutting through her monologue. Did you know Mom and Dad listed my house? There was a pause on the line. A beat of silence that told me everything I needed to know. Oh, she said. Her voice dropped an octave, losing the bubbly performance. They told you. You knew? I asked, feeling a fresh wave of hurt. You knew they were selling my home? Sav, come on, she said, sounding annoyed. It is not like they are throwing you on the street. They said they have a plan. A plan? I said. Their plan is to sell the roof over my head to pay for your wedding venue. It is not just a venue, Sav. It is the Gables. I closed my eyes. The entitlement was so casual, so deeply ingrained. Brooke, I said, that is my house. I worked for it. I paid for it. You cannot just take it because you want a bigger party. You are being so dramatic. She snapped. It is one house. Sav, you can buy another one later. You are the practical one, right? You always figure it out. You will land on your feet. You always do. The words stung worse than the theft. The practical one. It was the label they had slapped on me since childhood, to justify why Brooke got the ballet lessons and the new clothes and the car. While I got the hand-me-downs and the summer jobs, I was practical. So I didn't need things. I was strong. So I didn't need help. I am not being practical this time. Brooke, I said, I am keeping my house. We will see, she said, her voice turning cold. Mom said you would be difficult. Try not to ruin this for me. Savannah, I only get married once. She hung up. I sat in the silence of the car, looking at the black screen of my phone. I felt a sudden, desperate need to be inside my own walls. I drove home. When I pulled into the driveway, I ignored the sign. I walked up the steps, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The house smelled of lemon verbena, my mother's cleaning spray. I walked into the living room. The cream pillows were there, mocking me. I grabbed one and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a soft thud. I walked to the coffee table and swept the bowl of green apples onto the floor. They rolled away, scattering under the sofa. It wasn't enough. I needed to know how deep this went. I ran to the spare bedroom, which I used as a home office. I had a filing cabinet in the corner, a sturdy metal one where I kept everything important. I yanked the top drawer open. It looked normal at first glance. My tax returns were there, my car insurance policy, but there was a gap near the back. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached in and thumbed through the hanging folders. Medical, warranties, house. I pulled the house folder out. It felt light, too light. I opened it on the desk. It was empty. My original deed was gone. The closing documents from 3 years ago were gone. The letter from Seabrook Trust approving my mortgage was gone. I sank into the desk chair, the empty folder resting on my lap. This wasn't just my parents overstepping boundaries. This wasn't just them borrowing a key to clean up. They had come into my home, rifled through my private files, and stolen the legal proof of my ownership. Someone knew exactly what to take. Fear began to curdle into something else, something hot and hard and sharp, controlled anger. I picked up my phone again. I scrolled past my family's names. I found a contact I had saved 6 months ago after attending a workshop titled Women in Home Ownership, Lila Chen, real estate attorney. I pressed the call button. It went to voicemail. Hi, this is Lila Chen. Please leave a message. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. Hi, Lila. This is Savannah Roberts. We met at the workshop at the library last fall. I have an emergency. My parents have listed my house for sale without my permission. There is a sign in my yard. They have stolen my deed from my file cabinet. The realtor claims he has authorization. I do not know what to do. Please call me back. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the desk. My hand was shaking. I looked at the empty folder again. I needed to sleep. I needed to wake up and find out this was a nightmare. I walked to my bedroom. The bed was still made with that military precision. The duvet tight and unfamiliar. I stripped it off, throwing the pillows onto the floor. Trying to reclaim the space, I crawled under the sheets, still fully clothed, and curled into a ball. My phone pinged. I ignored it. It pinged again, and again. I groaned and reached for it, expecting another text from Brooke or a guilt trip essay from my mother. It was an email notification, but not from my family. Subject: Alert. Preliminary title request initiated. I sat up, the blood draining from my face. I opened the email. It was from a title company I had never heard of, based in the next town over. Dear Savannah Roberts, this email is to confirm that a preliminary title search has been requested on the property at 34 Maplewood Drive. Please review the attached request form for accuracy. I clicked the attachment. It was a PDF. I zoomed in on the bottom of the page. There, on the line marked Seller Signature, was a scrawl of black ink. Savannah Roberts. I stared at it. It looked somewhat like my signature. It had the same loop on the S, the same slant on the R, but I had not signed it. My breath came in shallow gasps. They were forging my signature. I quickly opened my banking app. I navigated to the credit monitoring section. I had set it up years ago and rarely checked it. The screen loaded. New inquiry detected. Yesterday. Inquirer. Ridgeview Capital Partners. Type. Mortgage real estate. I dropped the phone on the mattress. This wasn't just a family dispute. This wasn't just my parents trying to guilt me into selling so they could pay for a party. They were already moving the paperwork. They had a buyer lined up. They had forged my name. I looked around my dark bedroom, the shadows stretching across the floor. For the first time in my life, I was truly afraid of my own family. They weren't just messy or selfish. They were criminals, and they were coming for everything I had built. I picked up the phone again, my grip tight. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I opened the camera app and took a picture of the empty file folder. Then I screenshot the email with the forged signature, then the credit inquiry. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. I just hoped I wasn't too late to win it. The coffee shop was loud, a chaotic symphony of grinding beans and milk steamers that usually comforted me, but today the noise felt like sandpaper against my frayed nerves. I sat in the corner booth, clutching a paper cup so tightly the cardboard sleeve was beginning to crumple. Across from me sat Lila Chen. I had met Lila 6 months ago at a library workshop about property taxes and zoning rights. She had been the keynote speaker, a woman who spoke about real estate law with the precision of a surgeon and the protectiveness of a guard dog. She wore a sharp navy blazer and glasses that she pushed up the bridge of her nose with a singular finger. She was listening to me now, her eyes fixed on my face, not interrupting, not drinking her tea, just absorbing the cascade of insanity I was pouring out. I told her everything: the sign in the yard, the staged photos, the missing deed, the forged signature on the title request, the credit inquiry from Ridgeview Capital. When I finished, silence hung between us for a long moment, heavier than the coffee shop chatter. Lila leaned forward, clasping her hands on the table. She did not offer platitudes. She did not say she was sorry my family was doing this. She asked one terrified question. Do you still have full access to your county property records online? I blinked, thrown off by the specificity of the request. I think so. I said, it is public record, right? I have an account on the assessor's portal to pay my property taxes. Log in. Lila said, now. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling over the screen. The county website was archaic, a relic of the late 90s, but I navigated through the menus until I reached the login page. I typed in my credentials. The little wheel spun. It loaded. Go to the Recorded Documents tab. Lila instructed, her voice low and urgent. Look for anything filed in the last 30 days. I tapped the tab. A list populated. Most of it was old history. My original deed from 3 years ago. The mortgage release from the previous owner, but at the very top of the list, dated 3 weeks ago, was a new entry. Instrument type, power of attorney, limited. Grantor, Savannah Roberts. Grantee, Harold Roberts. My breath caught in my throat. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. What is it? Lila asked, though I suspected she already knew. I turned the phone toward her. A power of attorney, I whispered. Lila took the phone and zoomed in on the PDF image. She scanned it quickly, her eyes darting back and forth. It is limited to real estate transactions, she said, her voice clinical but tight. Specifically, the power to list, sell, and convey the property located at 34 Maplewood Drive. It grants him the authority to sign closing documents, accept funds, and discharge liens. I never signed this. I said. My voice was rising, cracking. I never saw this document in my life. Lila looked at the signature block at the bottom. The notary stamp is blurry, she noted. But look at the witness line. I squinted. The witness signature was elegant. Looped script. Marlene Roberts. I read aloud. My mother witnessed a forgery of my signature to give my father legal control over my house. Lila handed the phone back to me. She sat back, exhaling a long, slow breath. Okay, she said. Here is the reality. Savannah, in the eyes of the county recorder and the title company right now, your father is you. He has the legal authority to sell that house. If they have a buyer, and that credit inquiry suggests they do, they can push this through very, very fast. How? I asked. How can they just sell it if I'm standing right here screaming no? Because real estate transactions rely on paper, Lila said bluntly. If the paper says yes, the system moves forward. Most people assume families do not commit felonies against each other. The system relies on a presumption of good faith that your parents are exploiting. She reached into her bag and pulled out a yellow legal pad and a pen. We need to create friction, she said. We need to throw sand in the gears. But first, you need to understand something. This is not a misunderstanding. This is fraud. If we stop this, you are effectively accusing your father of a crime. Are you ready for that? I looked at the digital image of the document. I thought about the cream pillows on my couch, the empty file folder, the entitlement in Brooke's voice. They are trying to sell my life to pay for a wedding. I said, I am ready. Good, Lila said. She began writing rapidly. First rule, stop calling them. Do not text. Do not scream. If you talk to them, they learn what you know, and they will adapt. We need them to think you are just emotional and confused, not legally armed. She ripped the page off and handed it to me. It was a list of tasks. Build a timeline, she commanded. Write down every interaction, every text, every suspicious comment from the last 6 months. Check your bank accounts for any other unauthorized access. And Savannah? I looked up. Secure your physical space. If they have been inside to stage it, they have a key. Change the locks today. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of nausea and adrenaline. I had walked into the coffee shop a victim. I was walking out a litigant. I drove straight to the hardware store and bought a deadbolt set. I drove home, my eyes scanning the street for my parents' car or the realtor's sedan. But the street was quiet. The sign was still there, arrogant and crimson. I ignored it. Inside, the house felt different. It no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a crime scene. I went to the kitchen bowl where I kept my spare car key and the spare house key I gave to guests. The bowl was empty. I stared at the ceramic bottom. I had always kept a spare set there. And then I remembered, 3 years ago, the day I closed on the house, I had given a copy of the front door key to my mother, just for emergencies, she had said, beaming, in case you lock yourself out or need me to water the plants. I had thought nothing of it. It was a normal thing to do. A daughter gives her mother a key. It was a symbol of trust. Now, that key was the weapon they had used to stage the invasion. I changed the locks myself. It took me an hour. My hands shaking as I handled the screwdriver, stripping one of the screws in my haste, when the new deadbolt clicked into place, a solid, heavy thud. I felt a tiny fraction of safety return, but the emotional safety was gone. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marlene. Family dinner tonight at 6. We need to discuss the wedding logistics. Please come. We made your favorite roast. My thumb hovered over the delete button. Lila had said to stop calling, to maintain radio silence. But she hadn't said I couldn't listen. And if I didn't go, they would know I was planning something. They would know I had gone to ground. I needed to see them. I needed to look them in the eye and see if they could maintain the lie while I was sitting right there. I texted back. Okay. I arrived at my parents' house at 6 sharp. The driveway was full. My parents' SUVs were there, along with Brooke's convertible. But there was another car, a sleek, charcoal gray sedan with tinted windows. It looked expensive, aggressive. I took a breath, touched the phone in my pocket to ensure the voice recorder app was ready. Lila had told me to check the laws, and I knew I was in a one-party consent state, and walked inside. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic. It was a scent that used to mean safety, but now it made my stomach turn. "Savannah!" Marlene called from the dining room. "You are just in time." I walked in. They were seated around the mahogany table. Harold was at the head, looking flushed. Marlene was buzzing around with a serving platter. Brooke was scrolling on her phone, and next to her sat a man I had only seen in photos, Ethan Vale. He stood up immediately as I entered. He was taller than I expected, with a build that suggested expensive gym memberships and a suit that fit him like a second skin. He had dark hair, perfectly styled, and a smile that appeared instantly, like a switch being flipped. "Savannah," he said, extending a hand. "Finally, I feel like I know you already. Brooke talks about you constantly." I took his hand. It was dry and firm. "Ethan," I said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," he said, his voice smooth, a baritone that vibrated with confidence. "It is a crazy time, but we are managing." He sat down, adjusting his cufflinks. They were gold, real gold. Harold cleared his throat. "Well, sit down. Savannah, let's eat." I sat across from Brooke. She didn't look at me. She was focused on her salad, stabbing a cherry tomato with unnecessary force. "So," Marlene began, passing the potatoes, "we have some updates on the guest list. Ethan's family is bringing about 50 people from the city, which is wonderful, but it does mean we are at capacity for the venue." "That is nice," I said, keeping my voice flat, "and," Harold added, spooning gravy onto his plate, looking everywhere but at me, "we are moving forward with the open house on Sunday. We think it is best to just get the ball rolling." I gripped my fork. "The ball rolling on what exactly?" I asked. "On selling a house that doesn't belong to you?" Harold sighed, dropping his fork with a clatter. "Savannah, please. We discussed this. It is a liquidity issue. We need the cash flow for the deposits. We will pay you back with interest. It is a family loan. Essentially, a loan implies I agreed to it." I said, "You forged a power of attorney." "Dad, I saw the record." The table went silent. Marlene froze with the breadbasket in midair. Brooke finally looked up, her eyes wide. Harold's face turned a darker shade of red. "I did what I had to do," he snapped. "You were being difficult. You would have said no." "Of course I would have said no." I said, "It is my home." "You are being selfish," Marlene cried out, tears instantly springing to her eyes. "Look at your sister. She is trying to plan the most important day of her life, and you are worrying about paperwork." "It is not paperwork. Mom, it is a felony." Brooke slammed her hand on the table. "Stop it," she yelled. "Just stop it. You are ruining everything. Why can't you just help me for once?" I looked at Brooke. I saw the panic in her eyes. But it wasn't panic for me. It was panic that the check might bounce. "I am not ruining anything," I said quietly. "I am just refusing to be the bank that you rob." Ethan cleared his throat. It was a polite, measured sound that cut through the shouting. "If I may," he said. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He looked at me with an expression that was almost sympathetic, but his eyes were cold, dead cold. "Savannah, I understand your frustration. Really, I do. It is a shock. But I think you are missing the bigger picture here." "And what picture is that?" I asked. "The financial reality," Ethan said. He picked up his wine glass and swirled the red liquid. "Your parents are in a bind, a temporary bind. They have assets, but they are illiquid. The wedding is grand, yes, but it is also a networking event. It is important for my career and for Brooke's future. I don't care about your networking." I said. He smiled. A tight, patronizing thing. "Let's look at the numbers. Savannah, you bought the house for $250,000. You have paid down, what? About $36,000? Your current balance is $214,312. Give or take a few pennies." I froze. The number hung in the air. 214,000. $312. I knew that number. I had looked at my mortgage statement 3 days ago. It was the exact principal balance. How do you know that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan shrugged, taking a sip of wine. I am good with numbers. The point is, the market value is sitting at $350. There is over $100,000 in equity sitting there. Doing nothing, it is inefficient. We can leverage that, cover the venue, and pay you out a nice bonus for your trouble. Everyone wins. You pulled my credit report. I said, that is how you know. You are the one who ran the inquiry. Ridgeview Capital. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He just held my gaze, his smile fading into a look of bored appraisal. Ridgeview is an investment vehicle I consult for, he said. We provide liquidity solutions. We are prepared to make a cash offer, no contingencies. 7-day close. You could be free of that mortgage by next Friday. Free of it? I stood up. I don't want to be free of it. I live there. Harold slammed his fist on the table. Sit down, Savannah. This is happening. We have already accepted the preliminary agreement. I looked around the table. My father, red-faced and bullying. My mother, weeping into her napkin. Brooke, looking at me with resentment. And Ethan, the architect of it all, watching me like I was a variable in a spreadsheet that needed to be deleted. I am not selling. I said, and if you try to show my house on Sunday, I will call the police. I turned and walked out. You walk out that door, Harold shouted after me. And you are done. Do you hear me? You are cutting yourself off from this family. I didn't look back. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep the car in the lane. I pulled over 3 blocks away and called Lila. They know the balance, I said, my voice shaking. Ethan Vale, the fiancé. He knew the exact dollar amount of my mortgage. He admitted he is connected to Ridgeview Capital. They want to close in 7 days. 7 days? Lila's voice was sharp. That is a rush job. They are trying to outrun the title search. If they close and record the deed before we file an injunction, unwinding it becomes 10 times harder. What do we do? I asked. I am sending the letters tonight, Lila said. I am putting Oak and Iron Realty, the title company, and Seabrook Trust on formal notice of disputed ownership and suspected fraud. I am demanding an immediate freeze on all transaction processing. Will it stop them? It will scare the professionals, Lila said. Realtors and title officers lose their licenses for this kind of thing. They will pump the brakes. But Savannah? Yes? Ethan Vale. If he is running a shell company to buy family assets for cash, this isn't just about a wedding. That is money laundering behavior, or asset stripping. Be careful. This man is not just a groom. He is a shark. I drove home, constantly checking my rearview mirror, half expecting the gray sedan to be following me. The next morning, I was at work, trying to focus on a spreadsheet. When my phone rang, it was Trent Holloway, the realtor. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Ms. Roberts, Trent said. His voice was no longer smooth. It was jagged with anger. Mr. Holloway, I said, I just received a very disturbing fax from an attorney claiming to represent you. He spat. Alleging fraud? Threatening my license? Do you have any idea what you are doing? I am stopping you from selling a house I did not list. I said, You are costing everyone money, Trent shouted. I have marketing materials printed. I have a caterer booked for the open house. I have a cash buyer ready to sign. Do you know how rare that is? I don't care. I said, Cancel it. I cannot just cancel it. I take my direction from the seller of record, and according to the documents I have, that is Harold Roberts. Until a judge tells me otherwise, I am proceeding. If you interfere with my sale, I will sue you for tortious interference. He hung up. I stood in the hallway, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. He wasn't stopping. The letter hadn't scared him enough. He was too greedy, or perhaps too deep in it to back out now. I went back to my desk, but I couldn't work. I needed to see what they were building. I logged into my personal email. I had set up a filter years ago to catch any emails with my name in them. a vanity thing, originally, but now a surveillance tool. There was nothing new in my inbox, but then I checked the spam folder. There was an email forwarded from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line caught my eye. FW, pre-approval, proof of funds, Ridgeview Capital Partners. I opened it. It looked like it had been sent to my father's email address, and maybe he had forwarded it to me by mistake, or maybe to my old email that I shared with the family years ago. The attachment was a letter on heavy, formal letterhead. Ridgeview Capital Partners is pleased to extend a cash offer of $300,000 for the property at 34 Maplewood Drive. Closing to occur on or before the 31st of this month. $300,000. Ethan had told me at dinner the market value was $350,000. He was lowballing the offer by $50,000. He was stealing the house from me, buying it at a discount through his own shell company, and using my parents' desperation to do it. My parents would get the cash for the wedding. Ethan would get an asset with instant equity, and I would be left with nothing. It was a heist, a perfectly legal, paper trail-supported heist. I printed the email. I printed the credit inquiry. I took out my phone and backed up the recording of the dinner confrontation to a cloud drive my family didn't know about. Lila was right. I couldn't just be the daughter begging for fairness. I had to be a witness building a case. I started a new document on my computer. Timeline of events. October 15th. Request key back from Mom? Did not do. November 1st. Mom asks about house value casually. December 2nd. Forged POA recorded. December 5th. Staging items appear. I typed until my fingers hurt. I was not going to let them win. I was not going to let Ethan Vale walk away with my home in his pocket. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Brooke. Ethan is really mad. Sav. He says if you don't sign the ratification papers by Friday, things are going to get messy. Please, just sign them. I need this. I stared at the word messy. It was a threat. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. I added it to the folder. Let it get messy. I thought, I have the receipts, the legal system. I quickly learned, did not move with the speed of a breaking heart. It moved with the grinding, indifferent pace of a glacier. I sat in Lila Chen's office, watching the printer spit out page after page of dense, justified text. The office smelled of old coffee and vanilla air freshener, a stark contrast to the sterile terror I was feeling. Lila was drafting a lis pendens, a notice of pendency of action. She explained the Latin terms with a calm detachment that I envied. It was a formal notice recorded against the property title, alerting the world that the ownership of 34 Maplewood Drive was currently the subject of a lawsuit. It is a big red flag, Lila said, stapling the stack of papers with a sharp thwack. Any title company running a search will see this and freeze. No lender will fund a loan. No insurer will write a policy. It effectively kills the closing until the judge clears it. It sounded powerful, but as I held the document, reading the cold, accusatory language, plaintiff alleges fraud, invalid instrument, quiet title, I didn't feel powerful. I felt sick. These were not just legal maneuvers. They were declarations of war against the people who had taught me how to tie my shoes. We need to file this with the county recorder immediately, Lila said, handing me the folder. And while we are there, we are going to pull the physical copy of that power of attorney. I want to see the ink. The Alder Ridge County Recorder's office was located in the basement of the courthouse, a room that smelled of dust and decaying paper. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. We waited in line behind a man researching a boundary dispute from the 1950s. When we finally reached the counter, the clerk, a woman with reading glasses on a chain, looked at us with mild annoyance. We need to view instrument number 44290, Lila said, recorded earlier this month. The clerk typed slowly, then walked back into the archives. She returned with a folder. You can view it here, she said. No photos allowed unless you pay the certification fee. I paid the fee. I needed the photo. Lila and I huddled over the document. Seeing it on a screen was one thing. Seeing the physical paper was another. It was heavy bond paper. The signature at the bottom, Savannah Roberts, was done in a blue ballpoint pen. It was a good forgery, a frighteningly good forgery. It had the loops, the slant, the pressure points of my own hand, but it was the stamp that caught Lila's eye. "Look at this," she whispered, pointing to the notary block. I squinted at the circular purple stain. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Notary Public, Arthur J. Miller. Below it was the address of the commission, Pack and Ship on 4th Street. I read, "That is a storefront mailbox place," Lila said. "Not a law office, not a bank, a strip mall shipping center." "Why does that matter?" I asked. "Because," Lila said, her eyes narrowing, "banks have cameras, law offices have strict logs. Storefront notary services? They are volume businesses, and they are sloppy." We drove straight to 4th Street. The Pack and Ship was squeezed between a dry cleaner and a failing vape shop. The bell on the door jingled cheerfully as we walked in, a sound that felt jarringly wholesome for a place where a crime had been stamped into existence. The man behind the counter, presumably Arthur J. Miller, was eating a tuna sandwich. He wiped his mouth with a napkin as we approached. He looked tired, the kind of man who had surrendered to the mediocrity of his life years ago. "Can I help you, ladies? Shipping a package?" Lila placed her business card on the counter. It landed with a soft tap. "I am an attorney representing Savannah Roberts," she said, "and this is Ms. Roberts." She gestured to me. Arthur looked at me, then at the card, and I saw the color drain from his face. He stopped chewing. "We are investigating a fraudulent notarization performed at this location on December 2nd, Lila continued. "A power of attorney. The grantor was Ms. Roberts. She was not here on that date. She has never been here." Arthur swallowed hard. He looked toward the back room as if looking for an exit. I notarize hundreds of documents," he stammered. "I verify ID for everyone. It is state law. I am very strict. Then you should have no problem showing us your notary logbook for that day," Lila said. Arthur shifted his weight. "That is private information. I cannot show you without a subpoena." Lila leaned in. She didn't raise her voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Miller, if I have to get a subpoena, I will also be bringing a fraud investigator from the Secretary of State's office. If you knowingly notarized a signature without the signer present, that is a felony. You will lose your commission. You might lose this business. Or, you can tell us exactly who brought that document in." Arthur looked at me again. He looked at my hair, my eyes. Then he looked down at his hands. It was busy that day. He mumbled, "Who brought it in?" Lila asked. Arthur sighed, a sound of defeat. "The older lady," he said, "the blonde one. She comes in here a lot to ship packages to. Somewhere in California? She has an account here. Marlene, I thought, my mother sent care packages to my cousin in San Diego. She had the paperwork all prepared." Arthur continued, his voice whining now. It was all clipped together. "She said her daughter was in the car, sick with the flu, and couldn't come in. She showed me a copy of the driver's license. She said it was urgent for a medical bill or something. She seemed like a nice lady. I just wanted to help. You notarized a signature you didn't witness." Lila said, "She signed the witness line right in front of me." Arthur protested. "She said she saw you sign it. I figured, it's family, right? Who scams their own family?" I stared at him. The banality of it was suffocating. My financial independence, my home, my security, it had all been dismantled by a tuna-eating man in a strip mall because my mother seemed like a nice lady. We walked out. Lila was already on her phone, dictating a note to her paralegal to draft an affidavit for Arthur to sign. But I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Marlene had done it. Harold might be the beneficiary, the one barking orders. But Marlene was the architect. She had forged my signature, walked into that shop, lied to the notary, and smiled her way through a felony. "I need to go see her." I said to Lila, "Do not do that," Lila warned, lowering her phone. "Savannah, emotion is the enemy right now. I need to look her in the face," I said. "I need to know why." I dropped Lila back at her office and drove to my parents' house. It was midday, a Tuesday. Harold would be at his office, or whatever he called his consulting firm these days. Marlene would be home. I found her in the backyard. She was wearing her gardening gloves, kneeling on a foam pad, deadheading the rose bushes that lined the patio. It was a grotesque tableau of domestic normalcy. She was humming. "Mom," I said. She jumped, clutching her chest. She turned around, shielding her eyes from the winter sun. "Savannah, you scared me half to death. What are you doing here in the middle of the workday?" I walked onto the patio. I didn't scream. I felt incredibly, strangely calm. I went to the Pack and Ship on 4th Street today. I said, "I met Arthur." Marlene's face went still. The smile didn't drop so much as it froze, losing all its warmth. She looked down at her gardening shears. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "He told me you brought the power of attorney in." I said, "He told me you said I was in the car. He told me you had the papers already prepared." Marlene stood up. She brushed the dirt from her knees, taking her time, buying seconds of silence. "He is mistaken," she said. "Stop it," I said. "Just stop lying. I saw the document. I saw your signature as the witness. You forged my name. Mom, you committed a crime." Marlene finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard, the soft maternal mask slipping away to reveal the steel underneath. "I did not commit a crime. Savannah, I solved a problem. That is what mothers do. We solve problems." "By stealing my house?" I asked. "It is not stealing," she snapped, stripping off her gloves and throwing them onto the patio table. "It is borrowing. We are a family. We share burdens. Your father is under so much pressure. Savannah, you have no idea. And Brooke? Brooke has been fragile since the breakup last year. This wedding is the thing holding her together. So I have to be the sacrifice?" I asked. "Because Brooke is fragile?" "Oh, stop being so dramatic." Marlene scoffed. "You are not a sacrifice. You are the strong one. You always have been. You can handle a little instability. Brooke cannot." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You are the strong one." It wasn't a compliment. It was an indictment. I suddenly remembered being 10 years old, sitting in the kitchen with a scraped knee that was bleeding through my jeans. Brooke had been crying over a broken doll in the other room. Marlene had walked right past me, handing me a Band-Aid without looking, and rushed to comfort Brooke. "Savannah is fine," she had said to my father later. "Savannah doesn't need fussing over." I had worn that independence like armor for 20 years. I thought it was pride. Now I realized it was just neglect wrapped in a prettier word. I was the one who didn't ask for help, so help was never offered. I was the one who could take the hit, so they kept hitting me. "You don't need this house like Brooke needs her wedding," Marlene said. Her voice was quiet now, almost pleading. "You are capable. Savannah, you have a good job. You can get another mortgage later. Brooke needs this now. She needs to be settled. She needs Ethan. She needs a reality check." I said, "And so do you. I am not going to let you ruin this." Marlene said, "We are going forward. The open house is Sunday. Ethan has a buyer. It is done." I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I saw the fear in her eyes. But it wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of losing face. It was fear of the neighbors finding out they couldn't afford the champagne. "It is not done," I said. "I am filing an injunction. And if you try to sell my house, I will press charges for forgery. I will put my own mother on the stand." Marlene laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "You wouldn't dare. You are too loyal. Watch me," I said. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back at the roses. I didn't look back at the house that had never really been my home. I drove to a park by the lake and sat in my car, staring at the gray water. I needed to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I felt hollowed out. My phone rang. It was Lila. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately. "I survived," I said. She admitted it. She thinks because I am strong, I should just let them cannibalize my life. Classic narcissistic family dynamic. Lila said, "the scapegoat and the golden child. But listen, Savannah, I found something. I have been digging into Harold's financials. I wanted to know why they are so desperate for cash that they would risk prison, and I found a docket in the civil court records from 3 months ago." Lila said, "Crestline Outdoor Supply versus Harold Roberts, et al." "Crestline?" I said. "Dad invested in that camping gear startup 2 years ago. He said it was going to be the next Patagonia." "Well, it wasn't," Lila said. "The company went belly up, but apparently, your father signed a personal guarantee on the commercial lease and the inventory loans." "What does that mean?" "It means the creditors are coming for him personally," Lila explained. "There is a summary judgment pending. They are looking at wage garnishment, bank levies, asset seizure. He's looking at a liability of over $400,000. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the steering wheel. "The wedding," I whispered. "Exactly," Lila said. "The wedding isn't just a party, it is a smokescreen. If they can sell your house and get the cash into Brooke's hands, or pay off the vendors directly, the money is gone before the creditors can freeze his accounts. Or maybe they are using the wedding costs to justify moving money around. Either way, this is not about Brooke's happiness. This is about Harold's insolvency. They are drowning." I said, "And they are using me as a life raft. A life raft they intend to sink," Lila corrected. I hung up and started the car. I had one more stop to make. I drove to the downtown branch of Seabrook Trust. This was where my mortgage was held. I walked into the lobby, feeling like an imposter in my own life. I asked to speak to a loan officer. A woman named Mrs. Gable invited me into her glass-walled office. She had kind eyes and a picture of a golden retriever on her desk. "How can I help you?" "Ms. Roberts, I need to know if anyone has requested a payoff statement on my mortgage in the last 2 weeks." I said. Mrs. Gable typed into her computer. Her brow furrowed. "Yes," she said. "We received a request on Monday from a title company, and another one, looking here, initiated through our automated system using a telephone pin." "I don't have a telephone pin," I said. Mrs. Gable stopped typing. She looked at me. "The request came from a number associated with—" She hesitated, glancing at the screen. "It matches the secondary contact on your original application. A Harold Roberts? He is not authorized." I said. "He is using a forged power of attorney." Mrs. Gable's hands hovered over the keyboard. She lowered her voice. "Ms. Roberts, I cannot discuss the specific details of the interaction due to privacy regulations, but I can tell you that the request was flagged by our fraud department because the caller failed the security questions 3 times before providing the PIN." She looked at me, her face softening. "We did not release the statement," she said, "but they were very persistent. They tried to escalate to a manager. They claimed you were incapacitated. Incapacitated." The word hung in the air. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable." I said, "Please put a verbal password on my account. Nothing happens without the word Crestline." "Consider it done," she said. I walked out of the bank. The winter wind bit through my coat. They had called me incapacitated. They were erasing me. To the notary. I was sick in the car. To the bank. I was incapacitated. To the realtor. I was difficult. My phone buzzed again. A notification from WhatsApp. It was a voice note from Brooke. I sat on a bench outside the bank and pressed play. "Sav." Brooke's voice came through the speaker. It sounded tinny, breathless. "Please don't ruin this for me. I know you are mad at Mom and Dad, but Ethan and I have nothing to do with their money problems. We just want to get married. If you stop the sale, we lose the deposit on the Gables. We lose the caterer. I will be humiliated. Everyone will know. Please, Sav, just let it go. We will pay you back. I promise." I played it again. "Ethan and I have nothing to do with their money problems." It was a lie. Ethan was the one with the Ridgeview Capital connection. Ethan was the one who knew my mortgage balance to the penny. Ethan was the one driving the sale. And the tone. It was wrong. Brooke was usually shrill when she was upset. Or weepy. This was measured. The pauses were dramatic. It sounded scripted. "Please don't ruin this for me." It was the line designed to trigger my guilt. The line that had worked for 33 years, I didn't reply. I forwarded the audio file to Lila. Add to the timeline. I typed, attempted emotional manipulation. Lila called me 10 minutes later. I got the file. She said, "She sounds terrified. She sounds coached." I said, "Both can be true." Lila said, "But listen, Savannah, I just got off the phone with the county clerk. The injunction hearing is set, but the earliest docket slot is Monday morning." "Monday?" I asked. "The open house is Sunday." "I know," Leela said. "I tried to get an emergency ex parte order, but the judge wants a hearing because it involves a family dispute. He wants to give your father a chance to respond. So the open house is still happening? Legally, we cannot force them to cancel it until Monday." Lila said, "And Trent Holloway knows that. He is going to push forward. He is banking on the fact that once they have a signed contract from a buyer, it creates a new legal reality that is harder to undo. They are going to try to sell it on Sunday." I said, right under my nose, "They are trying to pressure you." Lila said, "They want you to see the crowd. They want you to see the momentum. They want you to feel like it is inevitable, so you will sign the papers just to make it stop. They want to make you look unreasonable in public." I looked at the reflection of myself in the bank window. I looked tired. My hair was windblown. I looked like a victim, but I wasn't. I was the owner. "Let them have their open house," I said. "Savannah?" Lila sounded worried. "You don't have to be there. You can leave town. We will serve the papers on Monday." "No," I said. "If I leave, they win. If I leave, they tell their story. They tell the neighbors I'm crazy, or sick, or selling to help my poor sister." I took a deep breath. "I am going to be there. Lila, I am going to stand in my living room. And if they want to sell my house, they are going to have to do it while looking me in the eye." Lila was silent for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Then I am coming too, and I am bringing the process server. If they want a show, let's give them a finale." I hung up the phone. The sun was setting, casting long, cold shadows across the pavement. I was done being the practical one. I was done being the safety net. I walked to my car. I had to go home. I had to clean my house, not for the buyers, but for the battle. The morning light in my living room was usually my favorite thing about the house. It filtered through the east-facing windows, soft and forgiving, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I had taken the day off from work, calling in with a migraine that was only half a lie. The pain behind my eyes was real, but it wasn't biological. It was structural. The foundation of my life was cracking, and I needed to sit in the rubble to understand how to clear it. I sat on my sofa, wrapped in a heavy knitted blanket, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I stared at the wall opposite me. I had painted that wall myself 3 months after moving in. The color was called Sage Drift. I remembered the day I painted it. I remembered the smell of the primer, the ache in my shoulders, the music I had blasted from my portable speaker. I remembered the feeling of absolute, terrifying ownership. I had chosen the color. I had paid for the paint. I had applied it. Now, that wall felt like it belonged to a stranger. Or worse, it felt like a temporary backdrop for a stage play directed by my parents. I allowed myself 10 minutes to cry. I set a timer on my phone, 10 minutes to feel the crushing weight of it, the pathetic reality that my parents loved their social standing more than they loved my security. I let the tears come, hot and humiliating. I cried for the little girl who used to wait by the window for her father to come home. I cried for the teenager who studied late into the night to earn scholarships so she wouldn't be a burden. I cried for the woman who thought she had finally earned her place at the table, only to realize she was on the menu. When the alarm chimed, I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweatshirt. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and poured the cold coffee down the sink. Grief was a luxury. I couldn't afford it. I had to choose strategy. My phone rang at 10 o'clock. It was Lila. "I have news," she said without preamble. "And you are not going to like it, but you need to hear it." I sat down at the kitchen island, opening my laptop. "Tell me," I said. I ran a comprehensive background check on Ridgeview Capital Partners. Lila said, "On the surface, it looks legitimate, registered in Delaware, standard articles of incorporation." But when you pull the thread, the sweater unravels. What did you find? The registered agent is a corporate service company, which is standard, Lila explained. But the principal address for the business operations? It is not an office park. It is a rented mailbox inside a UPS store in Philadelphia, a shell company. I said, exactly. But here's the kicker. I cross-referenced the authorized signers on the LLC filing. There is a name buried in the operating agreement, a managing member listed as E.V. Holdings. Ethan Vale, I whispered. Bingpot, Lila said. I dug into E.V. Holdings. It was incorporated 3 years ago. The registered address for that entity matches a condo in Chicago that was sold last year. And guess whose name was on the deed for that condo? Ethan Vale. So he is buying the house from himself. Effectively, I said, trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of the grift. He is using your parents' desperation to acquire a distressed asset, your house, at a below-market price. Lila corrected. He pays $300,000 in cash. He instantly gains $50,000 in equity. He likely flips it in 6 months for $370,000. He is not saving the family. Savannah, he is stripping it for parts. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. He is looting us, I said, and my parents are thanking him for it. There is more, Lila said. I had my paralegal do a deep dive on Ethan's digital footprint. His LinkedIn profile says he was a senior vice president at Sterling Global from 2018 to 2020. I remember him bragging about that at Thanksgiving. I said, I called Sterling Global's HR department to verify employment. Lila said, they have no record of an Ethan Vale. They did, however, have a junior analyst named Ethan Vance who was terminated for cause in 2019. Vance? I asked. I ran a name change search. Lila said, Ethan Vance petitioned the court to change his name to Ethan Vale 4 years ago, just before he met your sister. I stared at the screen, at the empty spreadsheet I had opened. He wasn't just a shark. He was a fraud, a man who had reinvented himself to sound more patrician, more old money, Vale. It sounded like a country estate. Vance sounded like a guy who got fired for padding his expense report. He is a con artist, I said, and he is marrying my sister in 3 months. Does Brooke know? Lila asked. I don't know. I said, I honestly don't know. I hung up with Lila and spent the next hour staring at Ethan's social media. It was a curated gallery of success. Photos of him on sailboats, photos of him at charity galas, photos of him holding expensive scotch. But now that I looked closer, I saw the cracks. The sailboat photo was tagged in Newport, but the registration number on the hull was obscured. The gala photos were always tight shots, never showing the wider room or the event banners. It was a collage of a life, not a life. I needed to see Brooke. I texted her. Lunch? Just us. Please. She replied 3 minutes later. Fine. The salad bowl at 12. The salad bowl was one of those places where the kale cost $14 and the acoustics were terrible. It was Brooke's favorite. I arrived early and secured a table in the back, away from the prying eyes of the Alder Ridge lunchtime crowd. Brooke walked in 10 minutes late. She looked exhausted. Her makeup was flawless. It always was. But there was a tension around her mouth that highlighter couldn't hide. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater that looked suspiciously like the throw pillows that had appeared on my couch. She sat down and didn't look at me. She spent a long time studying the menu, as if she hadn't ordered the same Caesar salad for the last 5 years. I am not changing my mind. Savannah, she said to the menu. So if this is an intervention, you can save it. It is not an intervention, I said gently. I just want to understand. Brooke finally put the menu down. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Understand what? That I want my wedding to be perfect? That I want one day where I am the princess and not the disappointment? You are not a disappointment, Brooke. I am to them. She hissed, leaning across the table. Her voice dropped to a frantic whisper. You don't see it because you are not there every day. Dad is a wreck. He drinks starting at noon. Mom is vibrating with anxiety. They need this wedding to look successful so they feel successful, and I need it. I need it to launch our life. Ethan says image is equity. Ethan says a lot of things. I said. Brooke narrowed her eyes. Don't start on Ethan. He has stepped up. He is handling the vendors. He is handling the payments. He is the only reason we are not canceling. Brooke, I said, keeping my voice steady, did you know the house was for sale? Really know? Brooke looked away. She picked at a loose thread on her sweater. I knew. I knew they were using it as leverage. She said, Dad said they needed to collateralize the asset to bridge the gap. Collateralize the asset? I repeated. That is not Dad's language. That is Ethan's language. So what? Brooke snapped. It means the same thing. They used the house to get the money, but selling it, Brooke, evicting me. Did you know that was the plan? Brooke took a sip of her water, her hand trembling slightly. I didn't ask, she admitted. Her voice small. I didn't ask what the mechanics were. I just asked if it would fix the problem. And Ethan said yes. She looked at me, and for a second, the entitlement vanished, replaced by a terrified child who was riding a bike too fast down a hill. I didn't want you to lose the house, Sav. I figured you would work something out. You always figure it out. Maybe you could rent it back from the new owners, or stay with us for a while. You thought I would be homeless, and you were okay with it as long as you got your venue. I said, it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Brooke's face hardened. She pulled the armor back up. It is not just a venue. It is my future. You have your career. You have your independence. I have this. This is my shot at the life you already have. Why can't you just give me this one thing? Because it is mine. Brooke, I said, my voice rising enough that a woman at the next table glanced over. It is not a piece of cake I can just give you. It is my home. It is my credit rating. It is my legal standing. Then sign the papers, Brooke pleaded. Ethan said if you sign the ratification, he can structure it so you get a payout too, like a severance. A severance, I said, tasting the bile in my throat. From my own life. Brooke, listen to me. Ethan isn't who you think he is. Brooke stood up. She grabbed her purse. Stop it. I am not listening to this. You are just jealous because for once, I am the one with the power. I am the one making the moves. She isn't making moves. I thought, she is being moved, like a pawn. She walked out of the restaurant, leaving me with 2 untouched waters and a check for $0. I watched her go. She walked with a brittle, frantic energy, like she was marching toward a cliff she refused to see. I drove home feeling heavier than before. Brooke wasn't a villain. She was a collaborator. She had traded her sister for an illusion of safety. And the worst part was, she knew it. That was why she couldn't look me in the eye. Lila called me later that afternoon. How did it go? She asked. She is in deep. I said, denial is a hell of a drug. She thinks Ethan is saving the family. She thinks selling my house is just collateralizing an asset. She is parroting him. Lila said, that is classic undue influence. But we cannot save her right now. We have to save the house. What is the plan for Sunday? I asked. I have arranged for a process server. Lila said, his name is Mike. He is 6'4" and looks like a linebacker. But he moves like a ballerina. He will be parked down the street. And the documents? I have drafted a formal notice of dispute of title and a copy of the complaint for injunctive relief that we are filing Monday morning. It is not a court order yet, but it is a legal bomb. It puts Oak and Iron Realty on notice that if they proceed, they are complicit in fraud. You want to serve it during the open house? Lila's voice was grimly satisfied. I want to serve it when the house is full. I want every potential buyer to see Trent Holloway get handed a stack of legal warnings. I want to nuke the sale from orbit. It felt aggressive. It felt mean. It felt necessary. Do it, I said. Saturday passed in a blur of anxiety. I stayed inside, cleaning the house with a manic intensity. I scrubbed the baseboards. I bleached the grout. I told myself I was reclaiming the space, but deep down, I knew I was preparing it for inspection. I was preparing for the violation. I decided to go for a run in the evening to burn off the adrenaline. I locked the front door. I checked the back door. I made sure the windows were latched. I ran for an hour, pounding the pavement until my lungs burned, trying to outrun the feeling of dread. When I turned the corner onto my street, the sun was setting. The streetlights had just flickered on. I saw a van pulling away from my driveway. It was a white cargo van, unmarked. It turned the corner and disappeared before I could catch the plate number. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sprinted the last 50 yards to my driveway. I ran to the front door. It was locked. The deadbolt was engaged. I unlocked it and threw the door open. I stopped dead in the entryway. The hallway was different. My framed photos, the black and white shots of the Chicago skyline I had taken on a college trip, the picture of me and my grandmother, were gone. In their place were generic canvas prints, abstract swirls of beige and blue, hotel art. I walked into the living room. My throw blanket, the one I had cried into yesterday, was folded into a perfect triangle. A vase of fake tulips sat on the coffee table. A scented candle was burning. Vanilla bean. I gasped, the air rushing into my lungs. They had been here. While I was running, I ran to the back door, locked. I ran to the windows, locked. How? I screamed into the empty room. How did they get in? I ran to the garage. The door from the kitchen to the garage was unlocked. I threw it open. The big overhead garage door was closed. Then I looked at the keypad mounted on the outside frame of the garage door. I had changed the front door lock. I had changed the back door lock. I had forgotten to reset the garage keypad code. My father knew that code. It was my birthday. He had helped me program it when I moved in. Make it something you won't forget. Salve. They had waited for me to leave. They had watched me jog away. And then they had punched in 4 digits, walked into my home, and erased me. Again. I felt a surge of rage so pure it made my vision blur. I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? I have a break-in, I said, my voice shaking. My home has been entered. Items have been removed. Are you in danger? Ma'am? Is the intruder still there? No, I said. They left, but they changed my furniture. There was a pause on the line. They changed your furniture? They are staging it for a sale I didn't authorize. I yelled. Please, just send an officer. I want to file a report. The police arrived 20 minutes later, 2 officers, looking bored and skeptical. I walked them through the house. I pointed to the fake tulips. I pointed to the missing photos. So, let me get this straight, the older officer said, clicking his pen. Your parents came in, cleaned up, and put up some nice pictures? They broke in. I insisted. I changed the locks. They used the garage code without my permission. Is your name on the title? The officer asked. Yes. Is their name on the title? No. Okay. Look, the officer said, closing his notebook. This is a civil matter. Ma'am, it's a family dispute. We can't arrest your parents for tidying up. No property was damaged. In fact, it looks like they improved the value. He chuckled. He actually chuckled. They stole my personal photographs, I said, my voice icy. That is theft. Did they steal them? Or did they move them to a closet? The officer asked. I ran to the hall closet. I ripped the door open. My photos were there, stacked in a cardboard box on the floor. See? The officer said. No theft. Look, ma'am, work it out with your folks. We have real crimes to deal with. They left. I stood in the driveway, watching their taillights fade, feeling entirely alone. The law couldn't see the violence of it. They couldn't see that moving my memories into a box was a way of killing my history. My phone rang. It was Harold. I answered it. I didn't say hello. How dare you? I whispered. Savannah. Harold's voice came through the line. It was quiet, calm, disappointed. I saw the police cruiser leaving. He said, Really? You called the cops on your mother? You broke into my house, Dad. You used the garage code. We didn't break in, he said, sounding weary. We accessed the property to ensure it was presentable. Marlene was worried about the cat hair. She just wanted to help. Help? I laughed. A jagged sound. You erased me. You took down my pictures. We neutralized the decor. Savannah, that is standard real estate practice. You want buyers to envision themselves in the space, not look at pictures of your grandmother. I don't want buyers, I screamed. I am not selling. There was a long silence. Then Harold spoke, his voice dropping to that register he used when I was a teenager and had missed curfew. The voice of absolute, terrifying certainty. You are being dramatic. Savannah. The words wrapped around my throat. Dramatic. It was the ultimate dismissal. It was the word he used to tell me that my reality was wrong and his was right. If I was hurt, I was dramatic. If I was angry, I was dramatic. If I was fighting for my home, I was dramatic. It is going to be a beautiful day tomorrow, he continued. The weather is perfect. Just stay out of the way. Sweetie, let the professionals handle it. We will have a check for you next week, and you will see. You will thank us. He hung up. I stood in the dark living room, illuminated only by the flicker of the vanilla bean candle. You will thank us. He truly believed it. He believed he could rearrange my life like furniture, and I would eventually settle into the new layout and be grateful. I blew out the candle. The smoke curled up, smelling of artificial sweetness. I am not being dramatic, I said to the empty room. I am being thorough. I went to my laptop. I logged into my bank accounts. I changed every password. I set up two-factor authentication on everything. Email, mortgage portal, utilities. Then I went to the closet and pulled out a fresh box of heavy-duty garbage bags. I walked through the house. I took the fake tulips and dropped them in the bag. I took the generic canvas prints off the walls and shoved them in. I took the cream throw pillows and stuffed them in. I carried the bags to the garage and threw them in the trunk of my car. Then I went to my toolbox. I took out my cordless drill. I had bought a set of wireless security cameras 3 months ago on a Black Friday sale, but hadn't gotten around to installing them. I opened the box now. I mounted one on the front porch, drilling the screws into the wood with a satisfying screech. I mounted one in the garage, pointing at the door. I mounted one in the living room, hidden on top of the bookshelf. I synced them to my phone. The feeds popped up, grainy but clear. I watched the screen. I saw my own face, pale and determined, illuminated by the phone's glow. I went to the bedroom and gathered my passport, my birth certificate, and the physical file I had started building. The printouts of the emails, the credit inquiry, the timeline. I put them all in a fireproof lockbox. I drove to my friend Jessica's house. She was the one who had sent me the listing link. Sav? She asked, opening the door in her pajamas. What's wrong? I handed her the lockbox. Keep this for me. I said, do not give it to anyone but me. Not my parents, not my sister, not even if they say I am in the hospital. Okay, she said, her eyes wide. You are scaring me. I am scared too. I said, but I am done being a victim. I drove back home. The house was bare again. My walls were naked. The generic art was gone. But I didn't put my own photos back up. I left it empty. Let them see the holes. I sat on the floor of the living room, checking the camera feed one last time. My phone buzzed. It was Lila. I will be there at 1 o'clock tomorrow. The text read, I am wearing my court suit. And Savannah? Yes. You don't have to be nice. You just have to be present. I stared at the text. You don't have to be nice. I had spent 33 years being nice, being the practical one, being the one who smoothed things over. Tomorrow, I was going to be the jagged edge. I lay down on the floor, pulling the blanket around me. I didn't go to the bedroom. I wanted to be right here, in the center of the battlefield. When the sun came up, I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I listened to the house settling. I listened to the wind against the siding. I waited for the open house. Sunday arrived with a sky so aggressively blue it felt like an insult. The weather apps had predicted overcast skies and a chance of freezing rain, which I had prayed for, hoping a storm might dampen the turnout. But nature, like my family, seemed determined to gaslight me. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and my street looked like a postcard for the American dream. I stood on the sidewalk across from my house, leaning against the trunk of Mrs. Higgins's massive oak tree. I was wearing my work clothes, Dark slacks, a button-down shirt, a heavy wool coat. I wasn't dressed for a lazy Sunday. I was dressed for a deposition. The cars had started arriving at noon. They lined the street, bumper to bumper, gleaming SUVs and sedans belonging to people who had $300,000 to spend and no idea they were walking into a crime scene. I watched a young couple get out of a silver Honda. The woman was pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The man was pointing at my roofline, nodding approvingly. It has a 30-year architectural shingle. I wanted to scream at him. I paid for it with my bonus check 2 years ago. Instead, I stayed silent. I watched them walk up my driveway, past the crimson balloons Trent Holloway had tied to the mailbox. I watched them step onto my porch. I watched them wipe their feet on my doormat and disappear into the throat of my home. It felt physical, a nausea that rolled in waves. I was watching strangers tour my dignity. They were walking through my living room, judging the size of my closets, calculating where their televisions would go, breathing the air I paid to heat. It was a violation so casual, so public, that it felt surreal. I saw movement in the front window. It was Marlene. She was wearing a dress in a soft, buttery yellow, one of the colors she had picked for Brooke's bridesmaids. She was floating through the living room, gesturing with a plastic champagne flute, laughing at something the pregnant woman said. She looked radiant. She looked like the hostess of the year. She looked like a woman who had absolutely no conscience. Harold was there, too. I saw him near the fireplace. He was not floating. He was standing stiffly, one hand in his pocket, the other gripping a water bottle. He kept checking his watch. Every time someone approached him, he would smile a tight grimace of a smile, nod once, and then turn away. Pretending to examine the crown molding, he knew I was out here. He wouldn't look out the window. He was a coward hiding behind drywall. Trent Holloway was in his element. He was standing in the open doorway, greeting people like a carnival barker. He handed out glossy brochures that undoubtedly featured the photos taken during the break-in. He laughed. He touched people on the shoulder. He projected an aura of easy success, the kind that made buyers feel safe, made them feel like handing over their life savings was the smartest thing they could ever do. I checked my phone. 12:45. We are parking now. Lila's text read. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of wood smoke and betrayal. A black Range Rover pulled up to the curb, blocking the driveway of the house next door. The driver's door opened, and Ethan Vale stepped out. He was late, and he was dressed to kill. He wore a charcoal suit that looked tailored in Italy. No tie. The top button of his shirt undone just enough to suggest casual dominance. He didn't look like a fiancé attending a family function. He looked like a CEO arriving to liquidate a subsidiary. He didn't walk to the front door immediately. He stopped at the edge of the lawn. Another car, a nondescript sedan, pulled up behind him. A man in a gray trench coat got out. He was carrying a thick manila folder stamped with a logo I recognized from my research, Apex Title and Escrow. Ethan nodded to the man. They spoke briefly, their heads close together. I saw Ethan point to the house, then tap his watch. The man in the trench coat nodded and patted the folder. My stomach tightened. They weren't just gauging interest. They had a title officer on site. They were attempting a same-day close. They wanted to get a signature on a purchase agreement, take a deposit check, and maybe even notarize the deed transfer right there on my dining room table, surrounded by balloons and cookies. They were trying to sprint across the finish line before the courts opened on Monday. Ethan turned and walked up the driveway. He saw me. He didn't stop. He didn't look surprised. He just offered a faint, acknowledging nod, as if I were a gardener he intended to fire later, and continued up the steps. I pushed myself off the tree. It was time. I crossed the street. My boots hit the pavement with a heavy, rhythmic sound. I walked up my own driveway, ignoring the balloons. I reached the porch just as Lila Chen arrived. She was a vision of legal retribution. She wore a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried a slim leather briefcase. Beside her walked a man who was roughly the size of a vending machine. This was Mike, the process server. He wore a windbreaker and a blank expression. "Ready?" Lila asked, her voice low. "Burn it down," I said. We walked to the door. Trent Holloway was just saying goodbye to an elderly couple. "Thanks for coming by," he chirped. "Offers are being reviewed tomorrow at noon, so don't wait." He turned and saw us. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners before he forced it back into place. "Ms. Roberts," he said, his voice booming for the benefit of the room. "So glad you could make it. And you brought friends." He blocked the doorway, his body language clear. "You are not coming in." "Mr. Holloway," Lila said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the chatter in the entryway like a knife. "I am Lila Chen, attorney for Savannah Roberts, the legal owner of this property." Trent laughed, a dismissive, barking sound. "We have been through this via email. Ms. Chen, I represent the seller of record, Harold Roberts, who is right inside. Now, if you are here to cause a disturbance, I will have to ask you to leave. This is a private event. It is an open house," Lila said calmly. "By definition, it is open to the public, and as the owner is standing right here, I am asking you once again to produce the seller authorization documents you claim to possess." I stood next to Lila, staring at Trent. Behind him, the living room had gone quiet. The pregnant couple had stopped looking at the fireplace. A man in a college sweatshirt lowered his cookie. "I told you," Trent said, his voice rising, performing for his audience. "Those are confidential documents. You are harassing me, and you are harassing these nice people. I am going to call the police. Please do." I said, "I would love for them to see the garage code entry logs." Trent's face reddened. "You are trespassing," he shouted. Lila didn't blink. She turned to Mike and nodded. Mike stepped forward. He moved with surprising grace for a man of his size. He reached into his windbreaker and pulled out a thick stack of papers, folded lengthwise. "Trent Holloway?" Mike asked. Trent recoiled instinctively. "What? You are served?" Mike said. He thrust the papers into Trent's chest. Trent's hands flew up automatically to catch them. "What is this?" Trent stammered. "That is a formal notice of dispute of title," Lila announced, turning slightly so her voice carried into the living room, along with a copy of the complaint for injunctive relief and fraud being filed with the Superior Court tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Lila continued, her voice clear and precise. "We are notifying you, and anyone present, that the ownership of 34 Maplewood Drive is legally contested. The power of attorney used to list this property is a forgery. Any contract signed today is voidable. Any deposit paid today is at risk. This house is not for sale. It is a crime scene." A ripple of movement went through the room. The man in the college sweatshirt put his cookie down on the side table as if it were contaminated. The pregnant woman grabbed her husband's arm and pulled him toward the door. "This is ridiculous," Trent yelled, waving the papers. "This is a stunt. She is just a disgruntled daughter who—" I stepped past him. I walked into my living room. Harold was standing by the mantel. He looked pale, his eyes darting between me and the fleeing guests. Marlene had frozen near the kitchen island, her champagne flute halfway to her mouth. And there was Ethan. He was standing by the dining table, next to the man with the title folder. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't fleeing. He was watching me with a look of mild curiosity, as if I were an interesting bug he had found under a rock. I walked straight to him. "Why?" I asked. The room was clearing out. People were shuffling toward the door, muttering apologies, avoiding eye contact. The air of celebration had evaporated, replaced by the heavy, awkward stench of family trauma. Ethan smiled. It was a small, private smile. "Why what?" "Savannah? Why is your LLC trying to buy my house?" I asked. "Why are you hiding behind a shell company?" Ethan glanced at the man with the title folder, dismissing him with a subtle jerk of his head. The man closed the folder and slipped out the back door. "I am not hiding," Ethan said softly. "I am investing. You are stealing," I said. "You forged a power of attorney. You staged a break-in." Ethan took a step closer. He smelled of sandalwood and expensive arrogance. I didn't forge anything. Savannah, your mother handled the paperwork. I simply provided a solution to a liquidity crisis. He leaned in, his voice dropping so only I could hear. Your parents were drowning. They came to me. They begged me to fix it, so I am fixing it. By taking my home? By reallocating resources. Ethan said, You are young. You can rebuild. Harold and Marlene? They are done. This house is the only thing standing between them and bankruptcy. I am actually being very generous. I am keeping the wolves at the door. You are the wolf. I said. Ethan chuckled. I am the family, Savannah, or I will be, in 3 months. And families help each other, even when it's messy. He said the word messy again. It was the same word Brooke had used in her text. Things are going to get messy. It was his word. He had planted it in her head. Because your family asked me to fix a problem, he said, his eyes hard and flat. I realized then what he meant. He didn't mean the debt. He didn't mean the wedding costs. He meant me. I was the problem. I was the obstacle. And he was the man who removed obstacles. The front door banged open. Brooke ran in. She was breathless, her hair half-curled, wearing a tracksuit that cost more than my car payment. She looked around the emptying room, her eyes wide with panic. She saw the process server standing by the door. She saw Trent clutching the lawsuit. She saw the neighbors standing on the sidewalk, pointing. Savannah, she shrieked. What are you doing? I turned to look at her. I am stopping the sale. Brooke, you are humiliating us, she cried, tears instantly spilling over. The neighbors are watching. The caterer is pulling up. You are making a scene. Is that what you are worried about? I asked. The neighbors? Can't we just talk about this privately? Brooke begged, grabbing my arm. Her grip was frantic. Please, Sav, just come into the kitchen. Let's just talk. We can work this out. Stop making everyone look at us. Privacy, that was her currency. She didn't care that her fiancé was a predator. She didn't care that her parents were felons. She cared that the audience was seeing the cracks in the set design. Lila stepped forward. She opened her briefcase. There is nothing to talk about privately. Brooke, Lila said, because the fraud is already public, and it is worse than you think. Lila pulled out a single sheet of paper. She held it up. Savannah, she said to me, I didn't want to tell you this over the phone. I ran a final title update this morning at 7 a.m. What is it? I asked. There was a filing attempted late Friday afternoon. Lila said, it was rejected for a formatting error, but it is in the queue to be re-recorded tomorrow. She looked at Harold. Harold looked at the floor. It is a deed of trust, Lila said, securing a promissory note for $50,000. A second mortgage? I asked. A bridge loan, Lila said, from a private lender, high interest, short term. And the borrower? I asked. Harold Roberts, as attorney in fact for Savannah Roberts. Lila said, I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just selling the house. They were trying to strip the equity out of it before the sale. They were trying to borrow $50,000 against my home, cash out, and then sell the house to Ethan's LLC, essentially double-dipping on the theft. If the sale fell through, or if it was delayed, that lien would have stuck. I would have been on the hook for a $50,000 loan I never took out. They were going to chain me to their debt. I looked at Harold. You were going to put a lien on my house? I whispered. Harold wouldn't meet my eyes. He mumbled something to the floor. It was just for the catering deposit, he said. We were going to pay it off at closing. It was just a bridge to nowhere, I yelled. My voice cracked, raw and painful. You were gambling with my life. Marlene stepped forward, her face twisted in a rictus of martyrdom. We were doing it for the family, she screamed. Why do you have to be so selfish? You have the house. You have the job. Brooke has nothing. She just wants her day. I looked at the few remaining strangers in the room. A couple in their 60s were standing by the door, looking horrified. Trent was trying to usher them out, but they were frozen, watching the implosion. I turned to them. I raised my voice. I didn't care about dignity anymore. I cared about truth. I am not selling this house, I shouted. The room went silent again. My name is Savannah Roberts. I am the owner. I did not list this property. My signature was forged on a power of attorney by my mother. I pointed at Marlene. She gasped, clutching her pearls like a character in a bad soap opera. My parents broke into my home. I continued, my voice shaking but loud. They used the garage code. They removed my personal photographs. They staged this furniture. And that man, I pointed at Ethan, is trying to buy it through a shell company called Ridgeview Capital to hide the fact that he is stealing his future sister-in-law's equity. Ethan didn't move. He just watched me, his face a mask of bored disappointment. It is a scam, I said to the couple by the door. All of it. The open house, the listing, the wedding. It is all funded by fraud. The woman in the couple looked at me, then at Trent. Is this true? She asked. Trent sputtered. It is a complicated family matter. Litigation is pending. The woman grabbed her husband's hand. Let's go, she said. They walked out. Someone else followed. Then another. Within 30 seconds. The living room was empty of buyers. The silence that rushed back in was deafening. It wasn't the peaceful silence of my home. It was the vacuum left after an explosion. I stood in the center of the room, trembling. I felt lightheaded. Harold sank onto the sofa, my sofa, with the beige pillows I had thrown in the garage. He put his head in his hands. Marlene was sobbing now, a loud, heaving sound that felt performative. You ruined it, she wailed. You ruined everything. I looked at them, my parents, the people who were supposed to protect me. I didn't ruin it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I just turned on the lights. Brooke was staring at Ethan. She looked like a child waiting for an adult to tell her everything was going to be okay. Ethan, she said, fix it. Ethan looked at the empty room. He looked at the legal papers in Trent's hand. He looked at Lila, who was standing guard like a sentinel. Then he looked at me. There is nothing to fix. Brooke, he said coldly. The asset is toxic. He buttoned his jacket. I am leaving. He didn't wait for her. He walked out the front door, past the balloons, past the process server, and into the bright, unyielding Sunday sun. Brooke watched him go, her mouth open. I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of my family, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. I felt clean. Lila stepped up beside me. That, she said quietly, is how you clear a title. The sirens cut through the Sunday afternoon silence, a wailing dissonance that shattered whatever facade of civility remained in my front yard. I stood on the porch, watching the blue and red lights flash against the white siding of my home. It was a violent display of authority, one that clashed horribly with the pastel balloons tied to the mailbox. 2 cruisers pulled up, parking at disjointed angles that effectively blocked the street. A police officer I didn't recognize stepped out of the lead vehicle, adjusting his belt. He looked annoyed, the look of a man who had been called to a domestic disturbance during a football game. Ethan Vale, who had been halfway to his car, stopped. The cruisers had boxed in his Range Rover. He stood by the driver's side door, his hand resting on the handle, calculating his odds. He couldn't leave without driving over the curb. And even he wasn't arrogant enough to run a police blockade in a tailored suit. He turned back toward the house, his face impassive, but I saw the tension in his jaw. He was trapped in the blast radius. The officer walked up the driveway, past the open house sign that now felt like an indictment. Who called it in? The officer asked, looking between me, Trent Holloway, and the small crowd of neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. I did. I said, stepping forward, my voice was steady, hardened by the adrenaline that had been coursing through me for days. I am the homeowner. I reported a trespass and an unauthorized sale of my property. Trent Holloway rushed forward, his smile gone, replaced by a sheen of sweat. Officer, this is a civil misunderstanding, he insisted, waving his hands as if to physically disperse the tension. I am a licensed realtor. We are conducting a scheduled open house. This woman is the daughter of the seller, and she is having a bit of a mental health episode. Lila Chen stepped in front of Trent. She didn't wave her hands. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held up the manila folder she had brought. "Officer, my name is Lila Chen. I am the attorney for Ms. Roberts. The gentleman speaking is attempting to sell a property using a power of attorney that we have flagged as fraudulent with the county recorder. We have also just served him with a notice of pendency of action." She handed the officer a copy of the filing. The officer looked at the paper, then at Trent. "Is this true?" the officer asked. "Do you have a valid deed transfer or POA? I have documents provided by the family." Trent spluttered, pointing back at the house where Harold and Marlene were huddled in the doorway like ghosts. "Her father signed the listing agreement." Lila cut him off, her tone razor-sharp. "A listing agreement signed by a person with no legal standing is an invalid instrument," she said. "It is an attempt to convey title via fraud. And continuing to market this property after being served with notice is a violation of the Business and Professions Code. If you invite one more person into this house, Mr. Halloway, you are not just a realtor, you are an accessory to grand theft." The words hung in the air. Fraud, invalid instrument, accessory. They were heavy. Legal stones that sank Trent's boat instantly. He looked at the officer, then at his crimson balloons, and finally at his shoes. He realized, in that moment, that his commission was gone and his license was on the line. "I am just the agent," Trent muttered, backing away. "I acted in good faith based on seller representations. I am shutting it down." He walked past the officer, ripping the open house sign out of the lawn with a violent jerk, and threw it into the back of his sedan. The officer turned his attention to the porch. He looked at Harold. "Sir, are you Harold Roberts?" Harold stepped out of the shadow of the doorway. He looked older than he had 10 minutes ago. His posture, usually so upright and demanding, had collapsed. "I am," Harold said. "Did you sign a listing agreement for this property?" Harold looked at me. His eyes were pleading, begging me to stop this, to cover for him one last time. He wanted me to be the practical one. He wanted me to say it was all a mix-up, so he could go back to his country club and pretend he hadn't just tried to rob his own daughter. I stared back at him, stone-faced. I was done covering. I signed papers to manage the asset. Harold said, his voice trembling. "To protect the family. To protect the family." I repeated, my voice flat. "By selling my home?" Harold's face flushed red. The shame was metabolizing into anger, as it always did with him. "You don't understand the pressure." "Savannah," he snapped, forgetting the police officer was standing 3 feet away. "We needed liquidity. You have this house sitting here, full of equity, just sitting. And we have expenses. We have obligations." "So you stole it?" I asked. "I didn't steal it. I managed it. You always think you are better than us, don't you?" The accusation hit me in the chest. "I think I am better?" I asked. "Yes," Harold shouted. "You and your little job and your savings account and your independence. You parade it around like a trophy. Oh, look at Savannah. She doesn't need anyone. Well, we needed you. And instead of offering, you made us beg. You made us do this." He gestured vaguely at the police car, at the scene he had created. I realized then, with a clarity that was both heartbreaking and liberating, that he would never admit he was wrong. He would burn the world down and blame the match for being too hot. He would rather destroy my character, paint me as the arrogant, selfish daughter, than admit he was a thief. "It is not my job to fund your lifestyle, Dad," I said quietly, "and it is not my fault you are broke." Marlene let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She pushed past Harold and collapsed onto the porch swing, burying her face in her hands. It wasn't just the wedding she wailed. The confession tore out of her, unbidden. Harold turned to her, hissing. "Marlene, shut up." "No," Marlene cried, looking up. Her mascara was running in dark streaks down her cheeks. "Tell her, Harold, tell her why." "It wasn't just the flowers and the venue." She looked at me, her eyes wild. "The lawsuit, Savannah, the Crestline judgment." I looked at Lila. She nodded imperceptibly. We knew, but hearing them admit it was different. "They froze the accounts last week." Marlene sobbed. Everything. The checking account. The retirement fund. We have $0. Savannah, 0. We took a private loan from a man in the city just to pay the deposit on the catering hall, because if we didn't pay by Friday, they were going to cancel Brooke's reception. And if they canceled, everyone in Alder Ridge would know you have no money. I finished for her. Marlene nodded, rocking back and forth. We couldn't let that happen. We have a reputation. We have friends. What would people say? So you decided to sell my house to pay off a loan shark and hide your bankruptcy? I asked. We were going to pay you back, Marlene insisted, clutching her pearls. Once the settlement cleared, once things stabilized. There is no settlement, Mom, I said. There is only debt. You were digging a hole and throwing me into it to fill the gap. Brooke was standing by the railing, watching her parents unravel. She looked horrified, but not for them. She looked horrified for herself. Her perfect narrative was dissolving into a messy white trash reality show on her sister's front lawn. I didn't know about the lawsuit, Brooke whispered. She looked at me. Sav, I swear, I didn't know they were broke. But you knew they were using my house, I said. Brooke bit her lip. She looked at Ethan, who was still standing at the bottom of the driveway, watching the proceedings with a detached, cold interest. Ethan said he would handle everything, Brooke said, her voice shaking. He told me not to worry about the details. He said you were being difficult. I repeated. He said you were going through a phase. Brooke continued, her voice gaining a little strength as she tried to defend her own ignorance. He said you were jealous of the wedding and acting out. He said we just needed to manage you until the papers were signed. Manage me. The words hung there. I wasn't a person to them. I wasn't a sister or a daughter. I was a variable. I was an obstacle to be managed, a resource to be mined, a problem to be solved. He told you I wouldn't mind? I asked. He said you would come around. Brooke said. He said you just needed to feel included. That is why we invited you to the tasting. That is why... She trailed off, realizing how pathetic it sounded. They had invited me to taste cake while they were forging my signature on a deed. Lila cleared her throat. She stepped off the porch and walked down the driveway toward Ethan. The police officer followed her. Sensing the shift in gravity, and speaking of management, Lila said, her voice carrying clearly in the crisp air, let's talk about Ridgeview Capital Partners. Ethan didn't flinch. He adjusted his cufflink. I am an investor, he said smoothly. I stepped in to help a family in distress. Is that a crime? It is when the investor is also the fiancé, and the funds are being laundered through a shell company to strip equity from a relative. Lila said. She opened her briefcase again. She pulled out a new document, a flowchart she had printed that morning. We traced the LLC registration. Ethan, she said, Ridgeview Capital links back to a post office box in Philadelphia. The same box used by EV Holdings, and the registered agent for EV Holdings, a man named Ethan Vance. Ethan's smile slipped. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, but a subtle tightening of the eyes. The charm evaporated, revealing the calculation underneath. Who is Ethan Vance? Lila asked, because according to his employment records, he was fired for cause from a brokerage firm 4 years ago for misappropriation of client funds. Brooke gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. Ethan? She whispered. Ethan ignored her. He was looking at Lila with a gaze that was pure, unadulterated hatred. You are reaching, he said. You have a few coincidences and a lot of imagination. I have filings, Lila corrected. I have IP addresses, and I have the preliminary title report showing an attempt to record a $50,000 lien against this property yesterday. A lien that would have gone straight into a bank account controlled by you, not Harold. She turned to the police officer. Officer, we have reason to believe this man is running a real estate confidence scheme. We are filing a formal fraud complaint with the district attorney tomorrow. Ethan looked at the officer, then at his blocked car. He realized the exit was closing. He looked less like a groom now and more like what he was, a predator who had been caught in the headlights. I have done nothing illegal, Ethan said. his voice cold. I made an offer. It was rejected. That is business. He turned to Brooke. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't apologize. Brooke, get in the car, he commanded. Brooke blinked. What? We are leaving, Ethan said. This is a circus. But my parents, Brooke stammered, pointing to the weeping figures on the porch. The wedding. There is no wedding, Ethan said brutally. Not if your father is insolvent. He turned and walked toward his Range Rover. Brooke stood there, frozen, the man she had defended, the man she had prioritized over her own sister, had just discarded her because the money tap had run dry. I looked at the crowd on the sidewalk. There were still a few neighbors watching, their phones raised, recording the spectacle. I walked to the edge of the porch. I looked at the strangers. I am not selling, I shouted. My voice echoed off the suburban houses. I am not selling. I am not moving. And anyone who entered this home today was misled. You were part of a lie. I pointed to the for sale sign lying in the back of Trent's car. This is my home, I said, and it is not for sale. I turned back to my family. I looked at Harold, defeated and small. I looked at Marlene, dissolved in shame. I looked at Brooke, standing alone in the driveway. I am sorry, I said. They looked up, hopeful. I am sorry to them, I said, pointing to the neighbors, for the noise, for the drama, but I'm not sorry to you. I drew a line in the invisible sand of the driveway. Get off my property, I said. Harold stood up. Savannah, you can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go? Go home, I said. Go to the house you mortgaged to the hilt. But you are not staying here. Ethan had reached his car, but the police cruiser was still blocking him. He rolled down his window and said something to the officer, who shook his head and pointed back toward me. Ethan got out of the car. He walked back up the driveway. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked dangerous. He stopped right in front of me. He was tall, looming over me, smelling of that expensive cologne that now smelled like rot. He leaned in close. His breath was warm against my ear. You think you won, he whispered. But you just made yourself a target. Do you have any idea how messy this can get? I can bury you in litigation for years. I can make sure you spend every dime of equity you saved just defending your title. It was a threat designed to trigger my old fear. The fear of scarcity. The fear of losing what I had built. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the practical one who avoided conflict. I was the one who had caught them. I didn't step back. I didn't blink. I looked him in the eye. I turned my head slightly, looking past him to Lila. File everything, I said. Lila nodded. She pulled her phone out. I am calling the judge for the emergency TRO, she said. And I am calling the district attorney's fraud unit. Ethan stared at me for a second longer. He saw that the threat hadn't landed. He saw that I was willing to burn the money to save the principal. He sneered, a quick, ugly expression, and turned away. I watched him walk back to his car. The police officer finally moved the cruiser just enough to let him pass, likely deciding that arresting him required a warrant they didn't have yet. But the license plate number was logged. The investigation was started. Ethan drove away, the engine of his Range Rover roaring as he sped down the quiet street. Brooke watched his taillights disappear. She looked at me, her face crumbling. Savannah, she started. Go, I said, but he left me. She cried. Go, I repeated. She ran to her car, sobbing. Harold and Marlene stood up. They looked like refugees from a war they had started. We will talk tomorrow, Harold said, trying to regain a shred of dignity. We need to figure out how to fix this before it ruins Brooke's life. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. The ruin didn't start today. Dad, I said, the ruin started when you decided my home was yours to spend. I turned my back on them. I walked to the front door. I stepped inside. The house was quiet. The generic art was gone. The fake tulips were in the garbage. The floors were bare. It was empty. But it was mine. I stood in the entryway and watched through the sidelight window. I watched my parents walk slowly down the driveway. They looked old. They looked small. They got into their car and drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of their image. Lila stood on the porch for a moment, finishing her call. She gave me a thumbs up through the glass, mouthing, "It's done." I nodded. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I slid down to the floor, sitting with my back against the door. My legs stretched out on the hardwood I had paid for. I was alone. My family was gone. My sister's wedding was imploding. My parents were facing bankruptcy and potential criminal charges. A con artist had threatened to sue me into oblivion, but I was inside. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the security camera I had installed. Motion detected. Front porch. I looked at the screen. It was just the wind blowing the crimson balloons that Trent had left behind. They bobbed in the breeze, cheerful and oblivious. Then another text came through. From Jessica. "I have your lockbox. Are you okay?" I typed back. "I am here. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But I was here." And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the practical daughter or the safety net. I was the owner. I locked the screen. I sat in the silence, listening to the house breathe, ready for whatever notification came next. Thank you so much for listening to Parents Listed My House for Sister's Dream Wedding. This story was a journey into the dark side of family dynamics, entitlement, and the moment a doormat finally becomes a door, locked from the inside. I would love to know what you thought of Savannah's choice. Did she go too far? Or did she finally go far enough? And where are you listening from today? Please leave a comment below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of betrayal, retribution, and justice, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts in English, and let me know what kind of revenge you want to see next.